Now, you testified that you were retained to give guidance to these three individuals. Is that fair? That's not what you said, but is that accurate?
These three within the group context.
So what did you recommend they do within the group context?
I recommended that, as I said, we discussed the three of them individually, just different ways that they had of coping, reinforcing that, talking about just some stress relieving techniques that they could do, some cognitive reframing of when they're out on the streets, that if they do not have control over the situation, like I said, they can't fight, they can't flee. The one thing they have control over is their own internal response. So some cognitive type of kind of reframing that they could do around the situation to control their own response to the situation. I also reminded them that the EAP was available to them.
And have you received any feedback from them as to whether these insights were helpful or not?
No, not in those two sessions.
In the most recent time you had with this included?
Yes, June 20th.
Now, you talked about the fight or flight scenario, and lack of control, and so on and so forth. Isn't the inability to engage in either fight or flight characteristic of almost any public employee in their work?
No.
Well, a police officer,
Police officer.
when provoked, cannot engage in fight or flight, correct?
Right.
Now, a town manager,
Mhm.
when provoked, cannot engage in fight or flight, correct?
Correct. A
Okay.
town manager might have a little more control over the environment that they're not talking about the entire time.
Well, isn't it true that generally it's inappropriate for any public employee to engage in fight as a response to pressures from outside individuals?
Objection. Irrelevance. And now we're talking about these three individuals and her interactions with those three individuals.
Yeah, Your Honor, this witness said that the issues with the parking attendants were essentially unusual during their severity because of the fact that they couldn't respond by either, or at least one of them couldn't respond by either fighting or flighting, not fighting. By either fight or flight. I think that was specifically a reference to the male officer. And I guess the question I'm really raising is his situation unique, or isn't it really more representative of public employment in general?
Okay, and let me clarify here what is unique about this situation. As you said, any public official could encounter a situation of someone approaching them, something that is very uncomfortable for them. As we've established, they cannot say things verbally back in a fighting kind of manner, and they can't walk away and ignore the person. So in that case, yes, but those are generally one-off situations. It's an incident here, an incident there. A police officer has power in a situation. If it goes over a line that the police officer feels is appropriate, they can arrest the person, or they can get in their cruiser and drive away. But for these individuals, this was going on constantly. It's the persistence of it, of being in these situations, is the cumulative stress, is what causes the problem.
Isn't it true that a police officer can only arrest because of a violation of the law, not because just out of provocation?
Right, and that's why I said if a behavior rose to a level that they felt was in violation of the law, they had that power.
Okay, and isn't it equally true that these three individuals, if they confronted a situation where a law was violated, they also had the right to contact the police officer and have the individual arrested, correct?
Well, at one point, they did call for help. The other thing is, they may not have the same knowledge of the laws that the police officer has.
Well, there's nothing that Francis City can train them about their legal rights, correct?
You would have to consult with the city.
But speaking more broadly, isn't it true that any public employee needs to demonstrate self-restraint? That's an important
Yes.
characteristic, and that's true here as well as in many situations.
Yes.
And it's sometimes you have to deal with people who are frustrating, aggravating, irritating, obnoxious, and you have to deal with them day after day after day, but that's part of the job, isn't that true?
When you said sometimes they have to deal, if they had to deal with a person day after day after day after day, then there would be some conflict that would need to be resolved. In this case, we're here. I think the point that I'm getting at is that for most public officials, yes, I would say most public officials, at one time or another, have irritating situations, and in certain departments, might be more frequent than others.
But isn't it true that in many ways it's easier to deal with it if you have to deal with it every day than occasionally? Because over time, you develop, isn't it true, over time, you develop skills and capabilities and training and other techniques for dealing with a situation whereas if it occurs on an occasional shocking basis, you may not have the resources or the experience or the training to deal with it as well.
In this situation, which is different from what I think you're describing, it has become very personal, number one. And number two, I don't think the persistence of this could be compared to what any other city official is experiencing or has experienced.
Don't you have council employees, public employees, that face stress and
Not this, I have not seen in my years of experience this kind of persistence.
Thank you.
Sharon?
Afternoon. Yeah, most of the questions I was gonna ask were already covered, from Mr. Myers. My, only questions that I have, you mentioned perception a number of times. Would you admit that perception is subjective to the individual,
Yes,
as opposed to something objective? For example, if I were to walk out on the street and shoot somebody for no reason, that would be, clearly I initiated force, correct? So this is the subjective perceptions, feelings of anger, frustration, anxiety were those individuals alone. It wasn't necessarily, it was their interpretation of the situation, correct?
right, but I think a question that you have to ask here is, would a reasonable person feel or perceive distress in this situation?
Would you admit that most people in, no matter what career industry they're in or lack thereof, experience frustration and anxiety at times?
At times,
And would you admit that individuals do not have a right to a job?
so you're saying individuals do not have a right to a job? I'm not sure what you mean by that.
Do you think that an individual simply who is existing, who lives and breathes, do they have a right to a job?
I don't believe it's a legislated right.
Does somebody have an obligation to employ them in some capacity?
No one has an obligation.
Okay.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Your Honor, can we just approach the bench and
Yes.
can you come over here?
Yes, absolutely. You can use these. Thank you.
Thank you very much. John?
Schreier, if you want to come.
You're gonna have to move them, I have to have a clear shot for here.
I don't have one. Yeah. I just,
And he can be involved in this, and take the jar and hear what the board says to say. And if it's okay with everybody, we'll keep going, as we take an afternoon break.
Sure. Alan, would you take this one, please? Okay, and then we'll put it back to the stand. Raise your right hand, you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give in this proceeding should be the truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do, so help me God.
Please be seated. State your name for the record and spell your last name.
Alan Givitz, G-I-V-E-T-Z.
And Mr. Gibbs, just, we understand that you're going to be testifying primarily with regard to Mr. Ayer. Do you understand that?
Yes, sir.
And then you'll be called later on for further testimony.
Absolutely, and to state for the record that this is in recognition of the fact that Mr. Ayer indicated he may not be available. We're not going to conclude the proceeding today, give him an opportunity to understand some of the specific testimony in regards to him.
Thank you. Just for the record, though, before you get started, just background and experience.
As far
Educational
as-
background.
High school diploma, some college, some military training, law enforcement training.
Okay, and your employment status with the city of Eden, from when to when?
It was from, I believe, September of 2012 till mid-July, I believe, sometime around there.
Okay, and so you're no longer working for the city of Eden?
No, sir.
And succinctly, because we're going to talk about Peter Ayer, but succinctly, what was the significant force or factor that caused you not to work for the city of Eden anymore?
Just a hostile work environment. I wasn't able to express myself. I wasn't able to defend myself. Whether verbally, I wasn't able to leave the situation because I couldn't leave. My office was downtown. I had nowhere to go but downtown.
So are you saying that due to the conduct by the defendants was a significant factor in your leaving the city of Eden employment?
Absolutely.
Let's talk about Mr. Ayer.
Yes, sir.
Would you describe what conduct Mr. Ayer participated in with you while trying to do your job?
Is it Air? I just want to be respectful.
Yeah.
Mr. Air was more sort of behind the scenes. He wasn't right there next to me. I could see him, witness him in Central Square on one occasion when I would walk by or drive by, pull out his radio, and I would find it odd that as soon as I would walk by him with his radio, that one of the defendants would show up. There was also another occasion when I couldn't figure out why I kept getting followed on Lower Main Street when I would get in my vehicle and drive away, and then 20 minutes later go down to Lower Main Street, and then all of a sudden being followed again until I saw Mr. Ayer at the bench by the roundabout in front of the post office, again talking on his radio, and shortly thereafter I'm being followed. There was also the last incident that I can remember was when I walked past Subway heading south on Main Street. Mr. Ayer came out, and I'm not sure where he was headed. I think it was just a coincidence at that point, to be honest with you. But he decided to follow me up Main Street, trying to engage me in conversation, asking me questions, and also taking pictures of me at that point. I declined to answer any questions, and at that point, after taking his photographs, he left.
What types of questions or comments was he making to you?
Primarily if the individuals, the defendants were being out there, were boosting our morale by giving us something to do.
Was that in a sarcastic tone?
I'm not sure, to be honest with you. I honestly didn't have many speaking occasions with Mr. Air.
And I'm sorry, on those 3 occasions that you just described, and can you give us a time frame on Mr. Ayer's participation?
I believe they were both in, or all 3 were in the afternoon, early afternoon, late afternoon.
And I'm talking in terms of months, which.
Oh, I have no
time
idea.
Or time frames.
I don't believe there was snow on the ground, if that helps. I believe I remember him being in at least short sleeves and maybe shorts.
Of this year?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, from your vantage point, from your perspective, was Mr. Ayer part of this group of that the defendants label themselves?
Only from